Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Panther Pourri, a Florida Hockey Now podcast. I am your host, Jaycob Megna. Here with me, as always, is my co-host, TJ Peterson. And joining us today, our good friend from where it's your team every day, the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, Mr. Armando Velez. Armando, how you doing today?
Doing well. Grateful to be joining you. And hey, just like how I introduced you on the show last time about using the slogan, hey, I appreciate you using the Locked On slogan on in returning the favor.
I owed you, man. Well, Armando, we wanted to get you on in particular because as of today or yesterday, development camp is officially underway for the Florida Panthers. Not a ton of brand new faces due to the Panthers just kind of, siphoning off their draft capital in favor of a Stanley Cup, which I am fully on board with. But we wanted to, of course, have you on. You were at the War Memorial Auditorium pretty much all day today, scouting the new guys. So wanted to get your opinions, your views, your takes. What did you see? What can you tell the listeners and now the watchers what you saw at Dev Camp?
Yeah, so basically for development camp, these for the first days is basically going around in the fundamentals, like working in for example, there was a drill that they did where they were just practicing the dump and chase and seeing, and also with neutral zone battles too, and what they're doing. And basically, I mean, if you really look at how the Florida Panthers really ended their series, especially in the Eastern Conference Final and the Stanley Cup Final, like building on with the puck battles in the walls to like end games. You think about the fundamentals of just when these guys are getting here, and especially with these guys who are still developing, not only in their play, but also in their brains too, on how they go into a new environment, because you have guys coming from overseas in junior hockey too, guys who might be transferring from different one college to the next. I know Tyler Muzelik is going to UConn this year too. So different. Also good situation for these guys to actually get some a new voice in their heads too, for them, because I mean Jordy Kinnear is also going to be getting a few guys into the mix this year. I mean, too, for the Charlotte Checkers, even if, depending on how camp goes. I mean, I'm not going to put a whole bunch of hyperbole saying that these guys are going to be the next best thing, big thing for the Panthers. But, this is you never know with these guys. I mean, Gustav Forsling was a guy who was on his fourth team when he arrived at the Panthers. Ryan Lomberg got his opportunity with the Calgary Flames at their Dev Camp years ago, too. So you never know what this kind of this week, can bring to these guys.
One thing that aside from your whole bit about, you can't necessarily go to Dev Camp and assume that the next huge impact superstar is going to be there, but there is one player that I am particularly curious about. My hometown hero from Glencoe, Illinois, Mr. Jack Devine. I specifically wanted to ask you about him because he's from my hometown and also had a great collegiate season with Denver this past year.
Yeah, I mean, now a two-time national champion for Jack Devine. I mean, he looked like he was very experienced out there for with his speed, confidence. We didn't really talk about him mostly in the media availability today but obviously he's going to get an opportunity to talk sometime this week for him too. But hopefully the Panthers, I mean, for him going into his senior season, I know there's some shades of possibly some Zach Hyman there for what happened at the end of his college career too. But for the Panthers and him going back into another season at the University of Denver, definitely a great opportunity for him being in a leadership role too for not only that group, but for when he's ready to sign his contract too. I mean, and you think about for the Panthers, it's such a great situation too, as when he is ready to come out of college, there's still possibly that talent that could be used on the cheap, as now this is the different period for the Panthers, how they're really going to have to use their development to in order to maintain this window too for them. And Bill Zito even said it going into training camp last season, how they want to put more of that focus into Charlotte, because I mean, Uvis Balinskis was there most recently. Mackie Samoskevich, who might be there to start this season for the Panthers too. That's a very important part of the organization that the Panthers do want to focus on.
Yeah, and I don't believe that Samoskevich and Sordif were at dev camp. I think they more or less graduated to training camp level.
Yep.
So with those two in particular moving on to the next stage of their careers, both with an opportunity to potentially start the season at the NHL level with Tarasenko officially headed to Detroit. Who at dev camp? The answer very well may be no one. Who at dev camp might be a particular surprise? I know it's only been a day so far, but who would you say is maybe most likely to get a shot with the big boys? Come early October.
I wouldn't say anyone in particular is going to be ready to join the organization in October for the Panthers, because they are a little bit squeezed too for what's coming up this season too. So basically, for the most part, you're going to see guys who it's mostly the question who I think, if I were to flip it in another way, of who I think will shine in Charlotte more like for this season. I mean, I feel like Kai Schwint got taller from the last time we saw him versus
Attaboy,
this
Kai.
time. So 6'4", he was the tallest man on the ice too. But also for the Panthers here, I mean, there's also opportunities for a guy like Liam Arnsby, who has an AHL contract for him too, who was a late round pick for the Panthers. So that's another guy for me who I think has an opportunity to possibly make something happen too for the Checkers. And also Josh Davies, he's an Energizer bunny, a guy who has a really high motor for him too. So that's another opportunity for who I think that Jordy Kinnear is going to have an opportunity to marinate a little.
To those of you listening and watching, Energizer Bunny was also a very popular descriptor for one Ryan Lomberg. Mm-hmm. So if you need to start keeping track of a new emotional support fourth liner, maybe keep your eyes on him. That could be your guy. There is one other name in particular that I did want to ask you about, Armando. Again, it's only been a day, but the most notable of the Panthers draft picks at development camp right now is probably Grayson Sawchin. Second round pick in 2023, that being the Panthers' first pick in the 2023 draft. Running on that string of not drafting in the first round for a few years. But Sawchin in particular had a really good profile when the Panthers drafted him. And now here he is, centering the top line of Group A at Dev Camp. What's he looking like? Where do you see him slotting in when the hockey calendar turns? What did you see out of Grayson Sawchin today?
Well, he will be returning to the WHL this season for the Edmonton Oil Kings. So that's. So
you almost made me throw up in my mouth.
He's still unsigned for the Panthers, but who knows what could happen for going forward in this dev camp. But I remember just when he got drafted last year, just a guy who spoke about a guy that he really looks up to is Matthew Tkachuk as a guy of a net front presence. And then once he was traded from Seattle to Edmonton, I mean, really his game exploded with 43 points in 37 games. So he looks definitely for him definitely someone with a lot of confidence, a guy who can shield the puck, get in front, can really cut well into the inside on his north-south game too. So that's another thing for Grayson Sawchin that I really like in his game.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to get one name in there. Sandis Vilmanis is somebody that has been attracting a lot of interest in terms of the prospect pool. It's, when you're the Stanley Cup champions, Panthers are Stanley Cup champions, won this 2024 Stanley Cup. The cup is theirs.
Quick reminder that the Panthers did win the Stanley Cup just 2 weeks ago.
And when this happens, your prospect pool becomes noticeably lighter as you shed draft picks and the prospects themselves for trade deadline rentals or just players that become part of your core, in the case of like Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Reinhart, et cetera, et cetera. So Sandis Vilmanis is somebody that's on the top of the prospect rankings for the Panthers. He's coming off over a point per game season in the OHL. This should be the beginning of his professional career in the AHL. What's the feeling around Sandis Vilmanis?
I mean, you can't ask for a better season than ever since the World Juniors when it was basically the highest place that Latvia has had for what during his last time around there for Vilmanis. So after that, then the trade from Sarnia to North Bay, which which his coach, Sandis Vilmanis, Alan Letang, he was the coach of the World Junior Canadian team in that tournament too. So for everything with Vilmanis going from Sarnia to North Bay and then him exploding and now getting an opportunity to work under the Panthers organization, I mean, for him, I mean, that's a really a big, outside of Jack Devine and maybe a Mackie Samoskevich, that's a really big profile name for the Panthers to really be looking at in their future. I mean, and also there's a new, I haven't recorded a podcast yet for tomorrow, but I feel that with the Panthers and winning the Stanley Cup, having a new practice facility, which opened in December, and still having development camp after and having that first one there, the facility kind of feels like it still has that new car smell in them for bringing in guys. And now you see with the Stanley Cup champions and the profile that brings with them, it really does create a little bit of a different vibe in this development camp for the Panthers.
And then one more name I wanted to get out there, their most recent pick, the highest pick in the 24 draft, Linus Karlsson is present. Initial impressions?
Linus Eriksson, I wasn't really looking too much into
Eriksson, my bad. Go
Linus
ahead.
Eriksson, yeah. So coming out of Sweden, he's going to spend a little bit more time in there come next season. But yeah, big risk for Bill Zito going into this one. I mean, and also I think about why he traded up for him, because I mean, when you think about the lack of capital that the Panthers have, but only being able to have 50 contracts on your books, you need to, and with the amount of long-term commitment that there already is on the roster, you could understand why you want to get someone into your system a little earlier for someone like Linus Eriksson and with a profile like him. So for him, not someone that I really had my eyes too much on today, if I'm being quite honest, but definitely someone that I will definitely pinpoint tomorrow.
Yeah, and that concludes our 2024 draft coverage at Panther Pourri. We have not recorded at all about the draft picks. I mean, they traded into the second round, which was certainly a risky decision, like you said. That gave up their best asset in terms of draft capital that would have been next year. And you know how general managers don't like to wait for draft picks. They like to get them right away. So that's interesting that they went ahead and did that. But I think that they might have been aware of what their cap situation was going to be like. The cap situation's not looking great if they wanted to add a, highly paid rental at the deadline without significant retention and probably offloading a player, and they don't really have the assets to make that happen. So I guess that we can maybe assume that it's not something they're going to do, but we'll see how the season goes. And one of the reasons that cap situation is the way that it is the recently signed contract extension to Anton Lundell, who got a 6-year deal at exactly $5 million per average annual value, which we were discussing a 5-year, $5 million average annual value deal before it was signed as probably being fair for the player and the team. Getting the extra year, I would say, is favorable to the team.
Absolutely.
But I still feel it's a fair contract because he's not done growing, but at the moment, he's not a $5 million player. What are your opinions on this contract extension for Anton Lundell?
There's a few ways that I look at this of Bill Zito making this contract offer, and with him saying, "Oh, we're going to spend up to the cap." It's also of him trying to control himself for future moves and to try not to be maybe too impulsive in the next few years when you still have Aaron Ekblad's contract and Sergei Bobrovsky's that expire in the next few years. So there's that. But also, I think about a few things that I still have not mentioned on my show yet, and the fact that if there is that projection that the salary cap does go up by $4 or $5 million, here's also something that I don't think hasn't been mentioned too much that I just thought of today. And it's the fact that the relocation of the Arizona Coyotes to Utah, having more capacity, having more seats, they're on national television to start the season too on opening night. So maybe that's another thing that makes Anton Lundell when the salary cap does go up, the fact that the percentage of the cap is going to look better and appreciate better as years go. Because when Barkov signed his 6-year deal, it wasn't the the start of the contract was at a higher percentage of the cap than what Anton Lundell's is currently.
Right.
Too. So that's another thing for how great of a deal this is. But it also signals that one of Carter Verhaeghe or Sam Bennett are going to walk next season, unfortunately. So that is the reality of winning. That is the reality of a cap too for the Panthers. But so that's the situation they find themselves in. So this is possibly getting your next 2C into the Florida Panthers, as Anton Lundell has taken so many different roles. Let's not forget the year that before he signed his ELC, he was playing top line minutes in Helsinki. Yep. After in his draft +1. So got that pro experience. Never had to play an AHL game too. So came over here and also translated it so well. So when you think about this contract and also the flexibility that's going to come with it too, the fact that you don't have to go back to the negotiating table, that's also a great situation for the Panthers. And also something that I've thought of too is Mackie Samoskevic's contract is up at the end of this year, and we don't know what's going to go on there. So if you find yourself in a position where you're in negotiations with him, do you bridge him? Because it's the name of the game for the Panthers here to go back and reset things over and over again to keep this window open, because cap space, it's the name of the game.
Mm-hmm. And just to your point there, Armando, Barkov at time of signing that 6-year, $5.9 million contract, that was over 8% of the cap. Mm-hmm. Lundell's 6-year by $5 million is under 6% of the cap,
which is great.
Yes. Well, so here's kind of my thoughts on it. It's very much in line with yours, because I had kind of 3 concurrent reactions. The first was, hell yes, Anton Lundell locked up for 6 years. This is great. The second was, wait, $5 million is not an insignificant cap hit for a third line center. Mm-hmm. And the third was, but $5 million is a pretty good price for a second line center. So the Panthers clearly see something in Lundell's development that they like enough to take this risk on him. It is still a risk. I want to be totally clear that giving Lundell 6x5 is still a risk, but it's a good risk to take. It's a risk that does keep your window open if it pays off, and I would argue that there is a pretty solid chance that it does. $5 million is about, like TJ said, about what we were projecting. I was saying for 8 years, I'd be happy to go up to 6, just to kind of keep him content for the extra few years into some UFA years, some extra UFA years. But 6x5, real tidy bit of work for Bill Zito. And Armando, I gotta say, I really think that giving Lundell this extension in particular kind of puts the writing on the wall for Sam Bennett.
Oh, no doubt.
You say that it's unlikely that both of Verhaeghe and Bennett return after this coming season, which is a contract year for both of them. Giving Lundell $5 million with term kind of makes it clear to me where the priority is. It's with the guy who is your franchise's all-time leader in playoff goals.
I have a question. Do you guys think of less of Anton Lundell for not saying, how about 8, I want to be a Panther?
That's where, if you're Bill Zito and you're doing that negotiation over the phone, that's where you hang up.
They were both like, oh, actually, I don't like the way that sounds. How about 6? So let's go back to 6.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, no, a little bit of PTSD there, TJ. Thank
you. Well, we're in the good times now, so.
We are. We can make all the Mike Matheson jokes we want.
Shout out to the Montreal Canadiens.
Matheson did turn out to be a pretty solid player. It just wasn't going to work here.
No, it wasn't going to work.
Look what it turned into, Patrick Hornquist.
Yeah.
Right, which was part of the culture shift that turned the Panthers into the Stanley Cup champion, because I don't know if you guys heard, but the Panthers won the Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah. Yep. Banners going up October 8th, Tuesday against the Boston Bruins.
Oh, say that again.
Gonna have to watch. The Boston Bruins are gonna watch the Florida Panthers lift their Stanley Cup banner into the rafters, or they're gonna hide in the locker room like a bunch of babies.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Some people have referred to Nikita Zadorov as Big Z, and he said, "No, don't call me Big Z."
We actually talked about this on the last podcast.
we did very briefly mention that.
He's going to be called Big Zed, I believe. That's the new nickname for Nikita Zadorov.
Which, by the way, Zed actually performed at a homecoming concert at FIU one of the years that I attended.
There you go.
Really?
No. Yep.
That's pretty cool.
So FIU's had multiple performances of EDM artists. Zed one year and then Tiesto another.
Tiesto's a good get for FIU. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's just out of character for Miami to have electronic music performances.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. Super weird.
Of course.
Yeah, very
I
strange.
thought they would have like outlaw country.
But
There you go, yeah.
FIU is less likely to flood. That's the only difference.
That's true too. That is a very important difference. Yeah, I think that's all we really need to say about Lundell. We're very happy for him. It is a risk, but it's one that's poised to pay off in the Panthers' favor and keep the window open a bit longer. And there was one more signing, just a single other signing since our last recording that we do need to discuss, and that is the signing of left-handed defenseman and 6'6" man, and also grew up in South Florida. Mm-hmm. Actually, get this. Born in Northbrook, Illinois, which was the next town over from Glencoe, Illinois. I've spent many an hours and many a days at the Northbrook Court Mall.
Pepperidge Farms remembers.
From Northbrook, from Northbrook. Actually, 30. He's 31, and he was born in Northbrook. I wonder how long he lived there. I wonder if he and I ever played against each other.
Well,
as
didn't
kids.
he come down the plantation?
Yes, but I don't know when.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently, David Dwork shared a tweet of a text he got that someone went to prom with his cousin. So it's like he knows a guy who knows a guy who knows his guy.
For sure.
There you go. This is like the
I think I have yet to say his name in all of this buildup. It's Jaycob Megna. The Panthers signed Jaycob Megna.
They signed Jacob.
A North Shore Chicago suburbs native. I guess technically he wasn't born on Long Island. We're just
So they signed Jacob, a guy that was born in Chicago and then moved, or from an early age lived in the Chicago suburbs and then moved to South Florida.
Right.
So naturally, congratulations on signing with the Panthers, Jacob.
I'm definitely left-handed and definitely 6'6".
Congratulations on being 6'6", Jacob.
I'm super happy that I just grew 8 inches on this podcast just now. Yeah, it's a 1-year deal, $775K. It's kind of one of those nothing contracts. He's a guy who maybe slots in as a 7D, just someone who you can fill in as a third pairing guy. Maybe there's a shot that he can play second pairing and be if he shows out. And he's played NHL minutes before, significant NHL time. He's a veteran of 185 NHL games, mostly with Anaheim, a couple with San Jose. Actually, I guess at this point it's mostly with San Jose.
But this past season he was with the Blackhawks.
Yes, as was Mackenzie Entwistle. So the two of them probably know each other a bit. Yeah, so and it's a variable contract also, most importantly.
Yeah.
It counts against the 50 contract cap, but if push comes to shove, you can throw him down the AHL and get the money off the books, more or less.
This is the perfect seventh defenseman. It's a guy that's not developing anymore at the age of 31, won't really be blocking anybody as the seventh defenseman sitting in the press box. But, let's say Nate Schmidt or, Nico Mikkola.
Yeah, the Panthers have Nate Schmidt.
Let's say one of these guys gets hurt in one of the first couple of games. In comes Jaycob Megna on the third pairing. And you're not exactly thrilled about it, but you're like, that this is steady Eddie here, who's 6'6". He's not necessarily going to give up some humiliating goals against. And it's a little bit of Uvis insurance, too. We all saw the noticeable regression from Josh Mahura year 1 to year 2. If that's something that does happen with Balinskis, then maybe Jaycob Megna is your third pairing defenseman up until you have the cap space to go out there and get a depth defenseman for a 6th round pick or something. I'm pretty confident that Uvis Balinskis will be good enough to play in the NHL this year. But you get that insurance with him, with Megna, and that's good to have. That's always good to have.
Yeah, and I'm also interested in what Dmitry Kulikov's what's going to happen next with him with the 4-year deal, because he's not at the point where Paul Maurice is going to scratch him every night, or even scratch him maybe at all. Or maybe he has a different way of seeing it now as an older player who might stay with the franchise after winning a Stanley Cup as far as their front office. So also interesting to see what the Panthers are going to do and that for Dmitry Kulikov to take a mentor role for someone like Jaycob Megna. I know he's not blocking anyone, but also a good veteran to be alongside if you need some injury insurance. I mean, him and Toby Bjornfoot, don't forget about him. That's another.
Trust me, I never will.
That's another guy who the Panthers could bank big on, hopefully for the Panthers. And also, there's also one player who the Panthers signed in the middle of like round 1 last year. It was Mikolas Hovorka. That's the one that the Panthers recently signed. So looking for another Uvis Balinskis type of person, Mikolas Hovorka, who's at dev camp for the Panthers. That's also one who maybe the Panthers could season a little bit.
I forgot about Hovorka. Yeah, that's another guy. I'd be shocked if Paul Maurice doesn't give Toby Bjornfoot some degree of a chance this season. I mean, he does have the draft pedigree. He was a first round pick, and first round pick, waiver claim, Swedish defenseman. Sound familiar? Anybody?
Mm-hmm.
We've got one of those.
Forsling was a first rounder.
I think he was. I think he was
I
late
don't think
first.
so. Fourth round?
Forsling was a fourth rounder.
Oh, fifth round. Never mind. 126 overall.
Yeah, there you go.
2014.
The thing about Bjornfoot is, though, that if he doesn't make the team in training camp, then he's probably hitting waivers again. And who knows what happens then.
Yeah.
Like,
but at that point, him
getting to the Panthers, though, does indicate that there wasn't significant waiver interest. The number of teams that he had to have passed on him for the Panthers to get him on waiver is pretty significant. And also teams
about Forsling.
Not really. Forsling was... I mean, he passed waivers the previous year, so I don't know if there was going to be a team that was grabbing him.
And he still had to make it to the Panthers, who it's not like they were bottom of the table.
Yeah, but they weren't that far from it. There were more teams that Bjornfoot had to pass through than Forsling for sure.
Yeah, of course.
This is just me saying that, like, he maybe gets claimed on waivers, maybe he doesn't. I don't really feel confident about either one. But
and either way, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to want him as the number 7, though. Go ahead, Armando.
When you're a Stanley Cup champion and you guys go through waivers, everyone wants a little piece of you. So that's like kind of like the good problems to have if you're the Panthers. So I mean, look at Mike Riley last year. I mean, went through waivers and was claimed by the Islanders after Ekblad and Montour were back in the mix for them too. So something had to give. And
they brought him back. It all worked out for him in New York. So that's good for him. Glad to see him on his feet. You don't want to see players come to Florida and all of a sudden their career just stops.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you got to throw those darts also when you're a Stanley Cup champion. That's the other part of it.
Yeah, that helps you get Nate Schmidt. That at $800,000, which is absurd value, and he's going to be really, really good this year.
I'm sorry, my tangent for the day is I can't look at the Ajax logo without my brain first thinking that it's a White Claw logo. It's a circle with the slightly off-center text. That's what it's giving me.
It just needs to be black and on a white can.
Right.
There you go. If anybody wants to Photoshop the Ajax logo on a can of White Claw, we will applaud the effort.
We might not like it or retweet it or compliment it, but we will applaud the effort. Gold star,
I will
tried.
Reply with the video of myself applauding. That's the Panther Pourri promise. I will give it all.
Are you doing a Rise Against bit here?
Sure,
Is that what you're going for, or was there something else there?
I believe that song was on one of the Tony Hawk American Wasteland tracks. I believe so.
It is also on the one mixtape that we once tried to make when we were in a band together. That was one of our covers. I think it was our closer.
Probably that I believe you.
I have not unretired from music yet, so my bass is collecting dust. So Panther Pourri, Locked On Panthers collaboration band.
We might need to talk, buddy.
Did we just get the band back together?
Hold on. We might need to talk. Wait a minute.
Do I need to drop $2,000 on a drum set?
TJ and I have been talking about maybe starting to play together again. We might need to talk.
And it's on the record. So if they know how a band gets started, they know how. They know where the first conversation was.
Amazing if this is the birth of something beautiful. All right, well, Armando, before we do our little outro, why don't you plug yourself? Where can the folks at home find you?
They can find me personally on Twitter X at Monoman12. They can follow the show account at LO_FLA Panthers, and on Instagram as well. Was a little off the grid the last few weeks after the second day of free agency.
Deservedly so. Armando, you put in a phenomenal amount of work covering the team throughout.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you earned yourself a break, man. Congratulations.
So yeah,
For sure.
Definitely glad to at least give a little bit and be back as covering Dev Camp, and then after this week for Dev Camp, we're going to be back at our celebrating the Stanley Cup and discuss more in depth of the history, where it's going to go, and everything. And I'm very excited to be covering that in the upcoming weeks. So Locked On Florida Panthers podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube.
And we'll be watching. Rate us 5 stars on SoundCloud, Apple Music, or Spotify once we start our band, our 3-piece outfit.
Bandcamp also.
Look, man, I've been starting to sing more again, so we might actually have something here.
My air guitar skills in traffic are pretty cool at a red light.
There you go.
They're
I
not
can
on the
belt
record.
in the car, man.
So.
Speaking of giving it all.
Exactly. Good night, everybody. Go Panthers.